So I got my ORIs all put together. I probably should have gone with the integral reservoir rather than the remote reservoir ones, because I wasn't sure how everything was going to package together, but this is about the best option I've got. So I've just got hard fittings going from the strut into the reservoir itself. Then I made up this block out of some HDPE that'll keep them separated, and then in order to kind of tie that all together and be rigid, you got a hose clamp that'll go around there. And so I don't really want just the bare hose clamp riding on the outside of these. I've got this piece of some shrink tubing, so I'll put that over the hose clamp, so wherever the hose clamp contacts the shocks and reservoir bodies, it should keep it pretty well protected. You can see putting that heat shrink on there makes it come out pretty nice. And it's going to be a pretty good looking deal on the outside of it, where you're not going to see the clamp, and just makes it look a little better than just a plain hose clamp. And so here's what it looks like installed. Comes out reasonably clean. Like I said, it's protecting the bodies of the shock and the reservoir from that hose clamp biting into them. I think it gives it a little bit more grip on there too. So I just got some excess back here, so I'll just hit that with a cutoff wheel, get it cut off down something like that to where I don't have a big tail hanging out. Then I can go ahead and get this thing installed. So here we are with the strut installed. Comes out looking pretty decent. That pretty much wraps up the front suspension on this. So everything else up front is just going to be some kind of cosmetic stuff, getting the front bumper and winch mount done, tidying up a few little things here and there. But as far as the major components, this thing's done, ready to go. So for now, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'll put some nitrogen in the lower chamber on here. I think they recommend like 90 psi in there to start with. And that'll help kind of hold everything up while I go to working on the rear, so I don't have to have stands or straps or something holding that thing in place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then, yeah, time to move on to the rear end. So I got everything pretty well prepped, ready to go. I had some link mount issues that I had to fix. Things have been in there for a while that had broken, so got that all welded up, reinforced. Everything's pretty much good to go there. So now I need to get focused on the axle. So to get this axle ready to go in there, I got to get all my link brackets and everything put on it. I'll have to build some brake lines and all that sort of stuff too. Since I already had an existing link set up on there that I want to keep the same basic geometry that I had, so I need to get my link mounts basically transferred onto this axle. So in order to do that, I'm going to come over here on the old axle, and you can see I've got some tubes where all the link ends went to. So I'm going to use this to build a jig that I can then transfer up to the new axle. So all of my link mounts will come out in the same basic orientation as I've got them here. So I've got the axle set up right now. It's sitting at the pinion angle that it was when it was in the rig, and I still want that same angle. So what I'm going to do is, coming off of this upper link right here, I'm going to bring out, got a piece of 1/2 inch square tube that I'm going to use for all this. Bring one out that I'll set it to basically 0 degrees, so that I know when I go to the new axle that also setting it at 0 degrees is going to get me right where I want to be. So I got my first piece tacked on here. It's sitting pretty close to 0 degrees. I would call that good. Give a bit of tack on it. Yeah, it's right in the ballpark. So we'll run with that. So now I'll run off of this down to the lower links, and then I can kind of tie it all together, make sure it's all good and stable. And I can use that to transfer over onto the new axle, make it all fit. Alright, and here is the completed jig. You can see it's rough and dirty, but it's good enough for a one-time use. So pop this thing off of here and start getting it set up on the new axle. Alright, so I got those tabs ground so they fit a little bit better along here. They're fitting around the tube pretty well up onto the truss. Just got them tacked in place. See, I kind of got my jig kind of roughed into where it's got to be. I think I'm still showing about 1 degree on there. Yeah, so I got to bring the front end of it down a little bit, but that gives an idea anyway of where that upper link's got to go. So now I just got to get my angle fine-tuned into where it needs to be, and then figure out how I'm going to go ahead and put some sort of a link mount in here and a deal over the top so it can be in double shear. And yeah, that's our next step. All right, so after a little cardboard aided design, this is what I've come up with for the base of my upper link. I think I'm going to wind up trimming off a little here and make a little more access to these bolt holes for that, the pinion guard and where it ties in up to the truss. But other than that, that's pretty much what it's going to look like. Now I just need to transfer cardboard to steel, and that'll get me the base, and then I'll make up something that'll go up over the top to put that upper joint in double shear. But for now, we'll get to working on putting this cardboard to steel. Alright, so here's the piece all cut out, ready to go. Got my slots cut in it to where I need to bend it. Also went ahead and drilled the hole where the joint's going to bolt down. So now I'll see if I can get this thing bent, see what it looks like. Alright, that's got to be getting close. Give it a little bit more. Yeah, looks like we need a little more. Alright, well, it's coming along, but as you can see, as I'm bending it, I'm running into a little interference in there, so I'm going to stick a cutoff wheel, open that up, give myself a little room to work with, and I should be able to finish getting it bent. And after a little more grinding and bending, this is how it fits. So I think it's going to work out pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll get all my welds done, and then I'll see about getting it tacked onto the axle, and I can see what I'm going to need for the piece to go up over the top. Alright, well, I went and did all the boring welding and grinding and everything off camera, but got this thing all pretty well finished up and tacked in place. So now that all 3 link mounts are located on the axle, I can go ahead and pull this little fixture off and then probably cut this tube off of it and use it as something to build this upper piece to. I can get these all tacked on a little better. Then the only thing that's going to be left is shock mounts, which I'm going to go in here somewhere. I'll have to get that sorted out once I get the axle slid up under there. Alright, so I think my next step in getting the rear end back in here is to put my new lower link mounts on. They're going to be in a slightly different location than the old ones were. So the old ones used to kind of sit kind of squared out like that, sticking out off the frame, and they had a tendency to catch on stuff. So I think for this, I'm going to kind of angle them a little bit and tuck them up under so they'll match up with the front lower link mounts, and then I can actually fill in the space in between them, so it'll be just a nice smooth transition between them. So for now, here it is tacked in place. So I'm kind of held up on the stand right now, but it's at the angle I want it to be at. So next thing, I've got a chunk of tube, a notch that'll go in here. So it'll attach the front end up to the chassis. I think I also want to do something kind of from this outer edge, maybe up to this tube. I don't know, haven't totally decided on that yet, but I want to make sure this is good and braced up solid, since this is where all of the force driving the rig forward is coming from. So I'll figure something out here. I don't know, maybe I'll do a couple of these in here, but I still want to brace this outside edge. But I also went ahead and cut a piece that'll go in here, like so. So that'll kind of bridge the gap between those link mounts and provide a nice smooth surface there, so there's no place that rocks can get caught up on. They should just slide right from one to the other. This is also going to make a good solid spot for the skid plate to mount to. That's some 1.5 by 2.5 3/16 wall, so it's plenty heavy. So yeah, now it's just a matter of figuring out what I want to do to get this as strong as it needs to be. All right, well, I decided I'm going with 2 tubes here to at least brace this to this bottom chassis tube. Probably come up with something to go in between these two to tie them in together a little bit. And I'd kind of still like to have something out here bracing it from twisting, but haven't decided what that's going to be yet. So for now, this will get me going. I can at least start getting the rear end hung in here while I'm thinking about what else I want to do on this area to make it strong as I can get it. Because I'm changing the angle of the lower link slightly, this bushing end of the axle is going to have to change its angle as well. So I went ahead and made up some new tubes that will hold these bushings a little heavier duty. This is some 2-inch 250 wall. The old one's 1 3/4 120, but it held up fine. But I have some of this, so I went ahead and used that. So I'm going to have to kind of get the axle set up under there, figure out what the angle's got to be, and then we'll cut this end off and re-notch the end of the link to match up to the new one and get it put together. So for right now, I think I need to pull the axle off the bench and get it set up on my cart so I can get it rolled underneath there, start figuring out where it's going to go. I went and loaded the axle up onto the sketchy little axle cart, which, if this thing survives putting the rear end in, I can probably throw it away. It's served its purpose, but worked pretty well. Just needs to be heavier duty. But anyway, so I got the upper link kind of loosely bolted in place, so that's going to center this thing where it needs to be. And then I'm kind of working on getting these lowers sorted out. You can kind of see this one doesn't have very much difference in angle, but the other side definitely can see the difference in angle between the old and new. So I just need to cut these off. I'll re-notch the tube to fit the new angle, and we should be pretty good to go. So the only Only issue I think I'm running into now that may be a problem is because everything is moved back about an inch now from where it was. So this is now looking like it wants to hit up here. So I might not be able to get all of the compression that I wanted out of this, but we'll play around with it and see what I get. But for right now, it's at least sitting under there, and I can kind of get an idea for how everything's going to look here. So. The rough notch on the end. See, it's a little sharp, but we'll take it over on the disc sander, get that cleaned up, give it a little bevel so I've got some good weld to get into it, and then we'll see how it fits. Right here you can see we got a nice bevel on the end. Should give us some good penetration on the weld when we get it on there. So I'm going to stick the link in and see what it looks like. And here it is in place. See, it fits up pretty good. Nice tight fit. So now I can get a few good tacks on this, hopefully without melting too much of that bushing. Always seems to I figure melt. Since I'm in the mood to weld stuff, I'm going to go ahead and weld up in here, at least get this bracket welded onto the frame so I can get my filler piece put in there, get it at least tacked in place. I'll go ahead and do that. I got my slider piece at least tacked in there for now. I think that'll work pretty well for making that nice and smooth in that area. So now, time to come back and start working on my upper shock mounts. See, I cut out the expanded metal that was in there before, so I got a little access. I got to cut these mounts off. The new mounts are going to wind up sitting up a little higher, using the same mount that I used in the front. So just be a little consistent there, I guess, and then come up with whatever I'm going to do down on the lower end. So start getting this stuff cut out and go from there. All right, so here it is, pretty much all cleaned up. Still got a little bit of sanding to do, but that'll work for now. So I'm going to go grab the strut with the mounts and everything on it and see how it fits in here. All right, I'll even kind of stay there. So I've got the strut set to where I want it for ride height. The axle sitting roughly ride height, so this is kind of where everything needs to be. There'll be a little fine tuning as we go, but it's pretty close to where it's got to be. So this, of course, is going to be in the way. The tire is going to be right here, so I'm going to have to rotate that over into this area, but I'll deal with that a little later. Right now, I just want to make sure this all fits. Hi, dog. Hello. Yes, you're a good dog. All right, go on. Go, play outside. So the issue I'm running into now, right here, with the angle that this mount is at, there's not room for the strut to swing out any further than it is. So I think I'm going to go ahead and probably cut out a little bit more here, give it some room to swing. Down at the bottom side, I think I need to probably cut the corners off of this a little bit so it sits up against this weld a little better. That'll give me room that I can weld from this outer flange all the way around it. Do that on both sides. But other than those two little things, looks like it's sitting in there pretty good. So I'll get those taken care of and stick it back in, see what it looks like. All right, so I got this back in here. It's not giving me a lot of clearance, but it's better than it was. Down at the bottom, it's fitting reasonably well, but I'm kind of having second thoughts about how I want to do this bottom mount. So what I'm kind of thinking is, instead of using these tabs, is I've got this mount, which I might see if I can modify to sit in there. That'll kind of raise this up and move it in a little bit, which will give me a little more clearance between the shock and the tire, and it'll also rotate this mount up to where I got a little bit more clearance on it too. So I think I'm gonna play with that and see what I come up with. I got that lower mount kind of modified, got it tacked in place. I think that's gonna work out pretty good. It puts this upper mount in a little better spot too, so I've got a little more clearance in here to be able to work with. So overall, I think that's going to work out pretty good. Puts the shock at a decent angle. Got everything kind of coming together where I want it to be. So now it's a matter of taking the reservoirs, getting them rotated to where I want them, and then I've got to finish up that upper link mount. Once I get those done, I'm pretty well ready to pull the rear axle back out, get everything welded up, painted, and get it back in there. I'm starting work on getting the double shear setup done on my top joint here. So I've got this top plate made up. That's pretty much what it needs to be. So I'm starting to kind of mock up something to come down the sides here. I think I'm going to bring this back to where it'll tie in pretty much all the way down to the bottom of this piece, and should work out. If I can get one side mocked up, the other side should be pretty much the same. So start getting up. So this is what I've come up with for side pieces. So I think that should work out pretty well. So I'll go make that in metal and see how it fits. Here's that piece in steel. So that's going to pretty well do what I want it to do. Unfortunately, I ran out of 1/4-inch plate making that one, so now I got to go get more so I can get the other side done. But I think for the time being, since I'm stalled out on that, I might start working on getting my brake lines done, see if I can get those headed in the right general direction. All right, well, I managed to come up with another piece of 1/4-inch plate to get the other side done here. I also threw in some gussets to try and keep it a little stronger side to side. So that part's pretty well together now. So that's where it's going to be. So right now I've got it. The axle basically is drooped out as I can get it. You can see you get up in here, that's starting to get pretty tight. So there's not a lot more angle left in that joint, but this is like 9 inches below ride height. So it's got plenty of travel. I'm not too worried about that. But what I am going to do is I've got some limit straps here. There was a bolt up here from where I was running them before. So I think I'll reuse that, and works out pretty well for that to go just like that. So I'll do one on each side, and that's really getting to be about it for rear suspension. This is once I get so here we got the axle back out. I've got everything welded up, ready to go. And I set up for my brake lines, got those made. So then I went ahead and pulled the hubs and rotors, calipers, all of that off of there. So it's basically ready for paint right now. But I think the next thing that I'm going to do is get all of this welded up. So my frame side will be done, and once I get that done and painted, then I can get everything kind of put back together. I still got to clean up the lower links a little bit, get some fresh paint on them, but it's all coming together. All right, well, I got my axle all painted up. I got all the nice shiny new parts all installed, so this thing is ready to go in. So I also went ahead and got this all painted, much as I can anyway, threw a fresh coat of barbecue paint on the exhaust, make it look a little decent for a while. So now I'm ready to stick the axle back in for the final time and get started on that. The fun part about putting this back in with this link setup is that I can't just drop this link in place, so I actually have to kind of slide the axle forward or kind of pivot it as best I can in order to get things to kind of slide in there. So it's actually going better than I thought that it might. So kind of like that. So fortunately what that puts me is with the rear axle really crooked underneath the rig, but I can work with that. So I'll get that top bolt in, get that started anyway, and then see about getting the axle pivoted into the right position to get the other links in. Well, I managed to get it in there, get all the links hooked up. I'll tell you, Axle Cart 2.0 is definitely going to be a little heavier duty and have 4 casters on it to make things like this a little easier to maneuver into place. But we'll get to that for the next project. So for right now, I've got all my air lines, brake lines, all that hooked up. Got the limit straps in place. The only thing left to do is to get the struts in. So before I can do that, I need to modify the position on the reservoirs for them. So I'll do that now. ORIs, in order to change the position of the reservoir, you got to loosen up this top cap. Use a strap wrench to get that just broken loose, and then this section in here can rotate around wherever it needs to go, and then just tighten the top cap back up. So I need to move this thing about 45 degrees from where it's at, I think, to make it fit right. So I'm going to get that done. Okay, so it should be loosened up enough. Slide that over there. Now if I tighten that back up, hopefully it stays where I want it. Or not. There we go. That's pretty close to what I was looking for. We'll see how it fits. And it looks like that was just about right. So with the strut just hanging like that, it's not actually attached to the axle end. It's leaning further forward than it ever would when it's hooked up. And you see I still got just a little bit of clearance there. And it's actually tucked in to where the tire shouldn't be able to get to it at any time. So I think that's going to work. So I'm going to do the other one the same way, get it put on, and then we'll get the axle end hooked up. So this pretty much wraps up the rear end. I've got the struts mounted on there now. Somewhere along the line, my math didn't do me any favors. I was thinking I had a couple more inches of extension on the struts before the limit straps came into play, but I'm at 15 3/4 inches out of 16 inches of travel on those. So I think I'm going to go ahead and pull those limit straps off and see how that works. But other than that, the rear's pretty well done, ready to go. So I think next time it's going to be back onto the front end, get my bumper and winch mount and all that done, and probably get the skid plate modified and put back in. So that's where we're headed next.